This is VOA News. I'm Marissa Melton. The Sudanese Air Force called on citizens on Saturday to stay indoors as they conducted a full aerial survey of areas of paramilitary rapid support forces activity. Amid conflicting reports from the two sides, the Army rejected assertions by the paramilitary that they had seized the presidential palace, Army chief's residence, and airports in Khartoum and the northern city of Moro. The Sudanese Doctors Union told Reuters on Saturday that at least 25 people were killed and 183 others injured in ongoing clashes across the country. It was unclear if all the casualties were civilians. Violence erupted Saturday between Sudan's main paramilitary group and the armed forces in an apparent struggle for control ahead of elections following a military coup. Construction has begun on a barbed wire fence along Finland's 800-mile-long border with Russia, less than 2 weeks after the country joined NATO. AP correspondent Karen Chamas has more.
The Finnish border guards showcased the building of the initial 1.8-mile stretch of the fence to be erected near a crossing point off Imatra. Finland's 832-mile border with Russia is the longest of any European Union member. The main purpose of the 10-foot-high steel fence with a barbed wire extension on top is to prevent illegal immigration from Russia. I'm Karen Chamas.
Ukraine's military said Saturday that Bakhmut, the target of Russia's offensive in the east, is experiencing some of its bloodiest fighting to date. A spokesperson for Ukraine's Eastern Military Command said Saturday that battles are taking place in the middle of the city's urban area. The eastern Ukrainian city was once home to 70,000 people. From Washington, this is VOA News. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was evacuated unhurt Saturday after a suspect threw what appeared to be a smoke bomb at an outdoor speech in western Japan. Reuters' Ryan Chang has more.
An explosion is heard at a venue where Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was due to make a speech on Saturday. Police detained a suspect who threw what appeared to be a smoke bomb. Witnesses say they saw an object sailing over their heads, heard a loud explosion, and then clouds of smoke. The Prime Minister himself took cover and was evacuated unhurt, according to public broadcaster NHK. Local news outlets say a 24-year-old male from Kawanishi City was arrested in relation to the incident, but police have so far yet to provide more details on the suspect. The incident happened in Saikazaki, a small fishing town 40 miles southwest of Osaka.
That's Reuters' Ryan Chang reporting. A new report from the National Urban League in the United States finds democracy for Black Americans is under attack. AP correspondent Julie Walker has more.
The civil rights and urban advocacy group cites threats such as extreme views adopted by some local, state, and federal political leaders who try to limit what history can be taught in schools and seek to undermine how Black officials perform their jobs. One example, the vote this month by the Republican-controlled Tennessee House to oust 2 Black representatives for violating a legislative rule. The annual State of Black America report documents an increase in recent years in hate crimes, as well as attempts to make voting more difficult. It also cites examples of extremist views being normalized in politics, the military, and law enforcement. I'm Julie Walker.
Tens of thousands of Israelis took to the streets of Tel Aviv on Saturday to protest against the government's planned judicial overhaul. The mass crowd chanted democracy and shame as they waved Israeli flags, which have become a prominent symbol at the frequent protests, which are now in their 15th consecutive week. After the main event was over and the crowd began dispersing, some tried to reach the Ayalon Highway, where Israeli police had already stationed themselves in an attempt to prevent protesters from reaching it. Scores of prisoners of war, including Saudis, were freed on Saturday as part of a cross-border exchange between a Saudi-led military coalition and Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels. This, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. The flights connecting Saudi Arabia and Houthi-led territory in Yemen were part of a multi-day transfer involving nearly 900 detainees. From Washington, I'm Marissa Melton, VOA News.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Sudan's army appeared to gain the upper hand on Sunday in a bloody power struggle with rival paramilitary forces after blasting its bases with airstrikes. At least 59 civilians were killed, including 3 UN workers. VOA's Steve Karish has more.
The fighting erupted on Saturday between army units loyal to General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, head of Sudan's Transitional Governing Sovereign Council, and the paramilitary Rapid Support Force, or RSF, led by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who is deputy head of the council. Efforts by neighbors and regional bodies to end the violence intensified on Sunday. That included an offer by Egypt and South Sudan to mediate between the fighting parties. Steve Karish, VOA News.
Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on Sunday again proposed establishing a group of countries not involved with the Russia-Ukraine war to broker peace, saying he had discussed the matter with Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping earlier this week.
Eu acho que nós temos que sentar numa mesa.
So we have to sit around the table
e dizer chega.
And say that's enough.
Vamos conversar porque a guerra nunca trouxe, nunca trará benefício para a humanidade.
Lula has been critical of the United States and the European Union for their role in the conflict. The Brazilian president told reporters in Abu Dhabi, where he finished a trip to Asia, that he was trying to gather a group of leaders that, quote, prefer to talk about peace rather than war. Unilateral action on trade by European member states is unacceptable, the bloc's executive said on Sunday after Poland and Hungary announced bans on grain and other food imports from Ukraine to protect their local agricultural sectors. This is VOA News. The Israeli government says it won't scrap judicial overhaul plans despite ongoing mass protests. AP correspondent Mimi Montgomery reports.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may have paused reform plans for now, but protesters are still turning up in numbers. Weekly protest organizers say they will put pressure until the plans are completely thrown out. Appearing on NBC's Meet the Press and asked about public anger, Netanyahu insists judiciary reform is needed.
I look for a broad consensus on the judiciary.
Currently on trial on corruption charges, the plan could give Netanyahu and his government allies final say in appointing judges and see Parliament gain authority to overturn the Supreme Court. I'm Mimi Montgomery.
Law enforcement officers are imploring people in a small town in the U.S. southern state of Alabama to come forward with information about a shooting that killed 4 people and injured 28 others during a teenager's birthday party. Among those killed was a high school senior who planned to play college football and was celebrating at his sister's 16th birthday Saturday night when gunfire erupted. Police gathered evidence Sunday at a dance studio where the party was held. They did not say if a suspect was in custody. The U.S. House of Representatives Judiciary Committee will be hosting a hearing in New York City on Monday to question the crime-fighting record of the Democratic prosecutor who indicted Donald Trump. AP correspondent Julie Walker reports.
The field hearing will examine Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg's policies and record. Republican Chairman Jim Jordan says they've led to an increase in violent crime and a dangerous community for New York City residents. Bragg said if Jordan really cared about public safety, he'd start in his home state of Ohio, where crime is reportedly higher than in New York. Bragg is suing Representative Jim Jordan to halt the inquiry that he contends is a transparent campaign to intimidate and attack him over his indictment of former President Trump. Julie Walker, New York.
An experimental mRNA cancer vaccine developed by Moderna and Merck cut the risk of death or reoccurrence of the deadliest skin cancer by 44% compared with Merck's immunotherapy treatment alone, U.S. researchers reported at a medical meeting on Sunday. The findings suggest that adding a personalized cancer vaccine based on mRNA technology could prolong the time patients have without recurrence or death, said NYU Dr. Jeffrey Weber, who presented the findings. The results presented at an American Association for Cancer Research meeting in Orlando, Florida, add data details to partial findings released by the companies in December. Additional data will be presented at an upcoming medical meeting and published in a peer-reviewed journal. I'm Joe Ramsey.
Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. A third day of fighting between Sudan's military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces raged Monday in the capital, and the UN says 185 people have been killed and more than 1,800 injured. Michael Atit reports from Khartoum.
The sounds of gunfire echoed across the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, and other towns Monday afternoon. The military headquarters, Khartoum International Airport, and areas around the presidential palace are the current main battlefields between the military and the Rapid Support Forces. The shooting affected the power supply and water system in the capital, making life more difficult for those trapped indoors by the fighting and people wounded in the clashes. Michael Atit for VOA News, Khartoum, Sudan.
A Russian opposition activist has been given a 25-year prison sentence, AP correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports.
Vladimir Kara-Murza has been convicted on charges of treason and denigrating the Russian military, receiving the harsh sentence after a trial that marked the latest move in a relentless crackdown on the opposition. Kara-Murza, a prominent opposition activist who twice survived poisonings he blamed on the Kremlin, has been behind bars since his arrest a year ago. He has rejected the charges against him as political and likened the judicial proceedings to the show trials during the rule of Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Slovakia on Monday joined Poland and Hungary in banning grain imports from Ukraine, even as Kyiv's staunchest allies come under domestic pressure to shield their agricultural markets. Find more at voanews.com. This is VOA News. A secret Chinese police outpost has been revealed in New York. AP correspondent Shelley Adler reports.
The Justice Department says 2 men have been arrested on charges that they helped establish a secret police outpost in New York City on behalf of the Chinese government. Officials separately announced charges against more than 36 members of China's national police, accusing them of creating and using fake social media accounts to locate and harass dissidents in the U.S. The cases are part of a series of Justice Department prosecutions aimed at disrupting Chinese government efforts to target Chinese dissidents, including those promoting pro-democracy views. I'm Shelley Adler.
An 85-year-old white man who shot a black teen at his front door in the U.S. Midwestern state of Missouri last week has been charged with armed assault, and a prosecutor said Monday there was a racial component to the case. Andrew Lester shot 16-year-old Ralph Yarl, who is recovering at home after being released from the hospital on Sunday. Yarl approached the wrong house to pick up his younger brothers. A U.S. Air National Guardsman applied to be a hitman, but the job advertisement was a joke, the AP's Lisa Dwyer reports.
A Tennessee Air National Guardsman has been arrested after federal agents say he responded to a parody website promoting jobs for hitmen. Josiah Garcia submitted an employment application February 16th to the website rentahitman.com and sent several follow-up emails over the next month that included his name, address, phone number, date of birth, and a photo of his Tennessee driver's license. An undercover agent provided Garcia with a fictional target package and $2,500. If convicted, he faces up to 10 years in prison. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
EU lawmakers urged world leaders on Monday to hold a summit to find ways to control the development of advanced artificial intelligence systems such as ChatGPT, saying they were developing faster than expected. The 12 MEPs, all working on EU legislation on the technology, called on U.S. President Joe Biden and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen to convene the meeting and said AI firms should be more responsible. The statement came weeks after Twitter owner Elon Musk and more than 1,000 technology figures demanded a 6-month pause in the development of systems more powerful than Microsoft-backed OpenAI's latest iteration of ChatGPT, which can mimic humans and create text and images based on prompts. Find us online at voanews.com or follow us on the VOA mobile app. I'm Joe Ramsey.
Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. The Sudanese capital endured a fourth day of heavy fighting Tuesday, despite promises by both the military and rapid support forces to honor a 24-hour ceasefire. Michael Atit reports from Khartoum.
That is the sound of an airstrike that hit close to military headquarters in Khartoum Tuesday morning. More fighting raged between the military and the rapid support forces. Meanwhile, the Sudanese Doctors Union said the death toll has risen to more than 180, with nearly 2,000 others injured. The Sudanese Doctors Syndicate Steering Committee also reported that 16 hospitals in Khartoum and other cities across the country have been shut down because of damage from the fighting or general insecurity. Michael Atit for VOA News, Khartoum, Sudan.
Vladimir Kara-Murza's wife spoke to VOA a day after Russia sentenced the prominent opposition activist to 25 years in prison on charges including treason after he criticized Russia's war in Ukraine.
I believe that the world needs to stand with people who, like my husband, are fighting and risking their lives and risking their freedoms to bring changes to Russia. So I will stand by my husband and continue fighting.
Evgenia Kara-Murza also told VOA on Tuesday she believes Russia will only stop becoming a threat to itself and its neighbors when it becomes a democracy. A Moscow court on Tuesday rejected an appeal from U.S. journalist Evan Gershkovich to be freed from pretrial detention, meaning he will stay in a former KGB prison until at least May 29th, while a spying case against him is investigated. This is VOA News. Russian forces on Tuesday stepped up heavy artillery bombardments and airstrikes on the devastated Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. Reuters correspondent Tamara Lindstrom reports.
Fighting has raged in and around Bakhmut in Donetsk region for months, with Ukrainian forces holding out despite regular claims by Russia to have taken the city. Footage released Tuesday by Ukraine's border guard service showed smoke pouring from the ruined city as soldiers engaged in firefights in the streets. To the south, regional officials in Kherson said a Russian artillery attack on a market Tuesday killed one person and injured 9 more. Ukrainian troops recaptured Kherson last November after nearly 8 months of occupation by Russian forces. The area is now under frequent fire from Russian troops entrenched across the Dnipro River.
Reuters correspondent Tamara Lindstrom. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on Tuesday condemned the violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity by Russia and again called for mediation to end the war, a peace initiative that was criticized by the Ukrainian government. Speaking at a lunch with Romania's president, Lula said a group of neutral nations must come together to help broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. His comments came after he set off a storm among Western allies by stating over the weekend that they were prolonging the fighting by supplying arms to Ukraine. China denies U.S. accusations of secret overseas police stations following the arrest of 2 men in New York charged with running one. AP correspondent Julie Walker reports.
China calls the U.S. accusations groundless. U.S. Attorney Breon Peace says the secret police station in the heart of New York's Chinatown operated as if it were helping Chinese citizens.
The secret police station appears to have had a more sinister use.
The 2 men arrested, Lu Zhengwang and Chen Jingping, are also charged with being agents of the Chinese Public Security Ministry. In addition, 34 MPS officers are also charged with harassing dissidents here.
The MPS has repeatedly and flagrantly violated our nation's sovereignty.
Julie Walker, New York.
American cable channel Fox News reached a $787 million settlement Tuesday in a defamation case brought by voting technology company Dominion that alleged the network knowingly aired false claims linking its machines to a conspiracy to undermine the 2020 U.S. election. The agreement to end the case avoided what most experts suggested would have been a damaging, high-profile trial for the conservative channel, in which owner Rupert Murdoch would have been compelled to testify in open court. I'm Joe Ramsey. This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Yemen's Houthi rebels say people have stampeded at an event to distribute financial aid in Yemen's capital, and at least 78 people are dead and dozens more are injured. An official says it took place late Wednesday in the old city in the center of Sana'a, where hundreds of poor people gathered at the event organized by merchants without coordination with local authorities. The Houthis say dozens of casualties were taken to nearby hospitals. The Houthi-run Interior Ministry says it's detained 2 organizers and an investigation is underway. There was new fighting in Sudan's capital on Wednesday night, despite both sides announcing they would abide by a new 24-hour ceasefire. A previous attempt at a truce failed a day earlier. The new ceasefire attempt came as alarm was growing that millions of Sudanese were on the brink of disaster from the past 5 days of warfare between the country's 2 most powerful generals. The fighting grew less intense in the first hours after the ceasefire took effect at 6 p.m., with sporadic clashes continuing in the city center. The U.S. medically approved abortion pill mifepristone will continue to be available for now. Reuters correspondent Tamara Lindstrom reports.
U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito on Wednesday paused court rulings that limited access to the pill. Those lower court decisions came after anti-abortion groups challenged the drug's 2-decade-long regulatory approval. Alito's decision gives the justices more time to consider requests by President Joe Biden's administration and the pill's manufacturer to block an April 7th injunction issued by conservative District Judge Matthew Kaczmarek in Texas that would greatly limit the availability of mifepristone while the case is litigated.
Reuters correspondent Tamara Lindstrom. This is VOA News. An Argentine court says 8 healthcare professionals will stand trial in the death of soccer great Diego Maradona. AP correspondent Lawrence Brooks reports.
3 judges of an appeals court confirmed the charges of homicide by negligence brought by prosecutors against members of Maradona's medical team. A medical board's report previously given to prosecutors claims Maradona was in agony for more than 12 hours, did not receive adequate treatment, and could still be alive if he had been properly hospitalized. The date of the trial hasn't been set, but it's unlikely to begin before next year. Maradona, who famously won the World Cup with Argentina in 1986, died of a heart attack aged 60 in late 2020 following brain surgery 2 weeks earlier. I'm Lawrence Brooks.
Andrew Lester, the 84-year-old white man accused of shooting Ralph Yarl, a black teenager in the U.S. Midwestern state of Missouri, pleaded not guilty in his first court appearance. Lester was in court Wednesday to answer charges of first-degree assault and armed criminal action, the shooting, which has attracted presidential attention and renewed national debate about gun policies. Lester turned himself in Tuesday and was later released on bond after agreeing to relinquish any weapons and have no contact with Yarl or his family. Scientists are racing to collect data to understand how the fastest warming place on Earth is changing and what those changes could mean for the planet's future. Reuters correspondent Fiona Jones reports.
The world's northernmost research station, located in Ny-Ålesund, a tiny town high above the Arctic Circle on Norway's Svalbard archipelago, is also the fastest warming place on Earth. Scientists have been collecting meteorological data at the Ny-Ålesund research station for over 40 years. But nowadays, researchers hoping to harvest ice cores are finding glaciers inundated by water.
Reuters correspondent Fiona Jones. A rare solar eclipse will cross over remote parts of Australia, Indonesia, and East Timor. Thursday's hybrid solar eclipse will swoop from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. The celestial event will shift between a total solar eclipse and a ring of fire eclipse as the moon's shadow moves across the Earth's surface. These kind of eclipses happen about once a decade when the moon and the sun are almost the exact same size in the sky. Other eclipses coming up in October and next April will pass over millions of people in the Americas. Find more on our website and the podcast Flashpoint Ukraine and Flashpoint Iran at voanews.com or follow us on the VOA mobile app. I'm Joe Ramsey, VOA.